Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 22 playthrough of the New York Yankees. We are at the start of the 2035 postseason. The Yankees are defending World Series champions, and we will be hosting the AL Central division winning Chicago White Sox in the ALDS shortly. Was a good season for the Yankees, won the American League East by 16 games. Dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the regular season, though, and unfortunately have several lingering injuries that are going to impact us as we begin the playoffs. Looking at our playoff roster, our pitching staff is actually in pretty decent shape right now after being banged up throughout the season. But we have three infielders with varying injuries. Victor Mejias battling back spasms day to day, only 2 days there, so he should be fine by the time we get into our playoff series. But then two huge players. Wander Franco has a gluteus strain that's going to be impacting him the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then Bo Bichette with back stiffness that's going to have a moderate impact on him for 1 week. So not optimal that three of our starting infielders are banged up as the playoffs potentially begin. We did make one change to the proposed playoff roster, and that was bringing Bo Bichette back to the roster. The AI, for some reason, suggested that we not do that. To make space for him, we had to send down the really good young hitting outfielder Eric Markin. I guess he's not really that young anymore, but you can see he batted .320 in Scranton this year and hit .421 for the Yankees in 57 at-bats. We are so stacked at the outfield right now, it came down to whether we wanted to have Markin or Eric Karras on the roster, and Eric Karras is now kind of our backup center fielder, even though he did win the World Series MVP award last season. But Kevin Daniel, who is not as good defensively, has taken over as our everyday center fielder. But want Karras with his better glove, 65 range, 55 error, 75 arm, pretty decent at playing the position, as opposed to Daniels, who has a much better bat, but not the same type of range in the outfield, not as good an arm. So good to have a backup center fielder, I guess. And Karras is not a bad hitter. He hit 300 for us this year in 424 at-bats, so certainly not a bad player either, even though he has kind of dropped out of the starting lineup at this point. So cautiously optimistic as we begin to host Chicago, but it's really going to come down to whether or not we can keep those infielders healthy and well, and hopefully get them all back to 100% health as soon as possible. Well, particularly with Mejias and Bichette. Franco's, injury is going to be impacting him for 2 to 3 weeks, but moderate impact on his running. Hopefully doesn't have too much of an impact on anything else for the six-time AL MVP who joined us as a free agent last offseason. And looking broadly at the playoffs, the Angels beat the Tigers in the wild card game, so we've got an all-AL West matchup between the A's and the Angels. The A's, the only team in the American League that won more games than us, so obviously our first job is to get to the LCS, but if we get to the LCS, it would be great to have a home field advantage and potentially be playing the Angels. And then out in the National League, the Cubs beat the Cardinals, so an all-NL Central division series. And then the Braves and the Giants going up against it in the other matchup. And you can see they've already each played one game, with the Cubs and the Giants taking the early series leads. Looking at our first game, our ace, Bobby Chapa, is on the mound. Was 14-5 in the 2035 season, 233 strikeouts, a 4.29 ERA. For the White Sox, Wilnie Kelleher, who was 2-7 with a 6.69 ERA. He does have great stamina, but not the best season from him. But you can see in 2034 he was 11-9 with a 2.63 ERA. So hunches he may have dealt with some injuries this year, especially with the 5 games he pitched at AAA. We will see whether the Yankees can get off to a lead here in the Bronx against the White Sox. and it is not to be in that first game of the series as the White Sox beat us 12-7. Unfortunate game for the Yankees. Chapa must have gotten roughed up pretty good. Not horrible. 3 runs in 4 innings. Oh, really lost it with our closer, Tim Wallace, with just a brutal performance. 1 1/3 innings, 6 hits, a walk, and 6 earned runs. And Wallace, as he always is, was really good this year. 2.09 ERA, 104 strikeouts in 64 2/3 innings, and 37 saves. So to get roughed up like that in the playoffs is not a great performance. Harder came on in relief of him and also got banged up too. So a tough way to begin the series for the Yankees here in the ALDS. We've already lost as many games as we did in the entire postseason last year when we swept through the ALDS and ALCS and then only dropped 1 game in the World Series against the Braves. Moving on to Game 2, Tyson Neighbors, 10-7 record with a 4.48 ERA for the Yankees this year, going up against Josh Robinson, who was 15-8 with a 3.49 ERA, 26-year-old. So a good pitcher on the mound for the White Sox. Need to get a win here at home before we head off to Chicago. And it is not to be, so the Yankees are down 2-0 in this AL Division Series to the White Sox. 8-1 loss today. Obviously a very good pitching game by Robinson to get them there. 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 3 walks, only 1 earned run. Neighbors was respectable with 3 runs across 6 2/3, but the Yankees bullpen once again giving up a lot of runs, and that has been a strength of ours throughout the season. So our backs are against the wall as we try to defend our World Series championship. We're going to have to win 2 in Chicago to just get back to the Bronx. And just kind of taking a look at the box scores, it looks like Franco and Bichette are both in the lineup despite their injuries, and we'll see how the rest of this series goes. Hopefully those guys can get a little healthier. And that health is going to have to start now. Ruben Mariona, the youngster who missed most of the season, pitched 9 games for us in 2034 with a 1.23 ERA. After coming back from 1 long injury, then got banged up again, but did end up pitching in 6 games at the major league level with a 2-1 record and a 3.46 ERA. He is the future of our pitching staff, but is going to need to. The future needs to be today to ensure that the Yankees season is going to be continuing. He'll be going up against Jose Ocampo, the 28-year-old, 8-11 record with a 5.70 ERA. So if there's a pitcher that potentially we can score some runs against, hopefully it's Ocampo. But it was not to be. We did score 6 runs against him, but the Yankees got walloped 16-6. So a year after going 11-1 in the playoffs and winning 113 games in the regular season, the Yankees season ends with a 3-0 sweep in the American League Division Series to the Chicago White Sox. Very disappointing end to the season for a team that had win-it-all type aspirations. And with the Yankees season over, need to start trying to figure out what to do with some of our staff. Manager Colin Cowgill is going to be a free agent if we don't re-sign him and leave the team. Thought about bringing him back earlier. He's looking for quite a lot of money. Obviously, he is a World Series champion manager after what the team accomplished last season and has won 3 consecutive AL East titles in his 3 years as a major league manager. So he's done a good job for us. His average relationships with the team, but he is good at development, outstanding with mechanics, good at aging. The issue is when we brought him on board, he let us control the hitting coaches, the bench coaches, the base coaches. He's gotten a little big for his britches, wants to control all of that stuff now. And he's also looking for almost $2.5 million a year. I think we're probably going to move on from Colin Cowgill. The issue is that because he controls the staff hiring, we can't rehire our hitting coach or our first base coach, which we would like to do until he's gone. But I think it's time to move on from Mr. Cowgill and maybe bring in a different manager to the team or potentially promote somebody from within our system. So I think we're going to be moving on from Cowgill. Also going to have some interesting decisions to make. We won't be making this decision, but seeing what happens with Bo Bichette, who has a $34.8 million player option for next year, will be pivotal to what goes on in our offseason. We've got a team option on Kindon Lavelle, who came back from a long injury, missed most of the year, but did end up going 1-3 for us with a 6.66 ERA, 72 ERA plus. The option is for $18.4 million. So he's been a very good pitcher for us in the past. And his profile makes it still look like he should be pretty effective, but he was definitely not effective when he came back from the injury this season. So we'll have to figure out what to do there with him. Other than that, the typical kind of decisions. Dave Bravo, our great young first baseman, is going to be earning more and more in arbitration. And then we also have Jared Kelenich's contract is running out. We'll probably move on from him unless he wants a lot less money, given that, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, we've got a surplus of really good outfielders right now. We'll kind of move on to the youth in the outfield potentially. And then Jose Montoya is going to be a real interesting decision for us. Came up through our system. Scouting discovery, 13 years ago at this point, has won a Gold Glove, been an All-Star a couple times, won a Silver Slugger a few years back, and was obviously a world champion last year. His batting stats have really kind of moved in the wrong direction over the last couple of years, though. You can see that back in 2033, he had a 134 OPS plus, 108 OPS plus last year, and just a 76 OPS plus this year. So potentially we could move on from him. He's a very good second baseman defensively. As I mentioned, he's won a Gold Glove. He's a fan favorite. But I could foresee a situation if Bo Bichette opts into his contract with us. We could make an argument that obviously Bichette will be playing shortstop for us next year if he does that. We've got Wander Franco to play third base, and we may just want to get Victor Mejias, who ended up playing 141 games for us this year at the age of 26, but really became kind of a super utility player for us when we brought on Franco. Do we just give the second base job to Mejias? He has hit better than Montoya over the last couple years and is going to be a lot more expensive. So that could be an interesting question for us as we head into the off season. And that's assuming that management brings us back or that ownership brings us back. Clearly, when we look at our goals for the year, wanted to win the championship. We made the playoffs, but we lost in the ALDS, so that's disappointing. We are about $50 million over the payroll that they wanted us to be at. And given that we had a relatively quick 3 games and out in the playoffs, we also ended up losing money on the year. So although it was a reasonably successful season on the field for the Yankees, at least during the regular season, didn't achieve a lot of the goals that ownership had for us. And they've definitely been frustrated with our unwillingness to cut spending over the years. We'll put it that way. And we've got a World Series this year featuring the 2 best teams in baseball, the A's, who led all of baseball with 102 wins, and then the Brewers, who led the National League with 100 wins, are the 2 teams that made it to the World Series. So should be an interesting matchup between Oakland and Milwaukee in the World Series. And we're moved to Game 6 in the World Series. The Brewers are up 3-2 in the series, but the last 2 games will be in Oakland. And Milwaukee is the World Series champions for 2035. So, Yankees were unable to defend our World Series crown. Milwaukee is now the champions. We're going to be moving into the off season now, and we'll do a quick review of the key stats, player performances, and what we are thinking before we head into the actual off season and start making some big decisions on what the Yankees roster should look like next year. And as the off-season begins, a lot of interesting information. Catcher Drew Romo has executed his player option for his last year, so he'll be with us, which is great. Bo Bichette also exercised his option. When we extended him several years ago, he refused to join us unless we made it a player option in his last season. Given what he's making, it wouldn't have been the end of the world if he had moved on. Physically, he's not where he used to be, but he's still a pretty good defensive shortstop, so we will have him on board. As I talked about earlier, we're going to need to make a decision on Kindon Lavelle on that team option, so we'll be giving that some thought. Brad Kreider, disappointed that we didn't win at all. Very upset that we didn't cut payroll. Not really happy that we didn't increase profit, but we did make the playoffs. He's unhappy with our performance. Wants us to win the championship and make some money next year. So we'll see what happens with that. Budget of $324 million should allow us to have a payroll of about $250 million. So should have plenty of money to do what we need to do. We lost our manager, Ray Holbert, in Scranton Wilkes-Barre. And as I talked about earlier, we also let our manager and ultimately our hitting coach and first base coach, who he had the ability to hire, go. So we're going to have to be bringing on some new talent in the leadership of our team. So going to be an interesting offseason for the Yankees. Going to be hiring a new manager and bringing on a new hitting and first base coach, as well as a new manager for Scranton Wilkes-Barre. So we're going to spend some time, review what we have across the organization and whether there are any internal candidates we can perhaps promote into some of those positions. And then obviously we've got to make a decision on the option year that we have for our starting pitcher. So that's going to be an interesting one. As I mentioned, been a really good pitcher for us over the years with Lavelle, but he is now, coming off of a major injury. According to our scout, he's still pretty solid, and that was a, postseason scouting evaluation after the playoffs. Still a decent pitcher. I don't know if he's an $18.4 million pitcher, going to turn 33 by the time next season is starting. In that 6.66 ERA he pitched his way to in the 9 games with the Yankees. Obviously a small sample size, just over 24 1/3 innings, but it's going to be an expensive decision if we make the wrong decision. And then the other big decision, as I mentioned now, is what are we going to do with Jose Montoya? We know that we're going to have Bichette back playing shortstop for us this coming year, Wander Franco at third base, and Dave Bravo is at first. So we potentially have the opportunity to just turn the position over to Victor Mejias at second base and move on from Jose Montoya. It'll definitely open up some money for us if we decide maybe we need to bolster the starting rotation, particularly if we let go of Kindon Lavelle. Looking at the Yankees' performance for 2035 overall, 97-65 record was not quite as good as we had anticipated. It was a weird season. Got off to a good start in April and May, then we're average in June, a great July, a good August, but then a mediocre September, and that certainly carried over into October, and then the 3-game sweep that we unfortunately faced in the playoffs to the White Sox. So disappointing end to the season. Offense was still very good, first in batting average, on-base percentage, OPS, WAR, WOBA, second in runs scored, first in hits, second in extra base hits, fourth in home runs. first in strikeouts, second in stolen bases, first in base running. The offense for the Yankees, not surprisingly, was not a problem. And the pitching was also pretty good. Second in the league in ERA, second in runs allowed, first in WAR, tied for first in hits allowed, second in opponent batting average, third in home runs allowed, second in strikeouts. Defense was not as good as it's been in previous years, sixth in defensive efficiency and fourth in zone rating. But still, all in all, was a very good Yankees team over the course of the full season. The issue is that we had some injuries, and our starting rotation, with all the money that we spent on bringing on Wander Franco last year, was probably one top-notch pitcher short from my perspective. Obviously, when you lose 3-0 in the playoffs, one starting pitcher is not going to fix that. So we certainly got beat by a better team in the playoffs in the White Sox. But the goal is to make some decisions this offseason to turn things around. Looking at the Yankees' batting stats for the season, as we've already talked about, the offense was definitely not a problem. Gabe Cologne, the star young outfielder, another brilliant year. Batted .331, 24 homers, 90 runs batted in, 215 hits, 123 runs, and put up a 6.3 WAR. Kevin Daniels, another young outfielder, really burst upon the scene this year with a fantastic season. 27 homers, 90 runs batted in, 305 batting average, and a 6.2 WAR. So good to have some of those younger players really taking over. And fitting in that mold is also Dave Bravo, our 27-year-old first baseman. 28 homers, 111 ribbies, 277 batting average, 123 OPS plus, and 2.7 WAR on the season. Wander Franco, who joined us at third base, six-time MVP, not going to win the MVP this year as he missed over a month, but in 502 at-bats, batted .329, 22 homers, 77 runs batted in, 140 OPS plus and a 5.4 WAR, so a fine season by him. Shiku Shu, the right fielder, became a bit of a platoon player with all the talent we have in our offense this year, and the left-handed batter wasn't regularly starting against left-handed pitching, but still a productive year. 287 batting average, 20 homers, 94 runs batted in, 129 OPS plus and a 4.2 WAR. Interesting that Mejias and Montoya ended up with the exact same number of at-bats last year, because the big question we need to figure out is whether we will bring Montoya back. Let's see exactly what he's looking for. I'm guessing he's looking for a lot of money. Yeah, $23 million a year. We can probably get him for a little less than that. He is an excellent defensive second baseman. Offensively, he's kind of an average profile at this point, so I think we will give him a qualifying offer if he wants to come back for 1 year and $18.9 million. Would be happy to have him on board, but I think we're going to move on from Montoya, who will turn 30 next year, and give the second base position over to Victor Mejias. Not as good defensively. His infield range is actually not what you want to see for a second baseman. So from a defensive perspective, that's definitely not optimal. But if he can get to a ball, he's going to make a play on it with his brilliant error, turn double play ratings, and a very good arm. He's really a third baseman by nature. But obviously when we have Wander Franco at third base, that's going to be where he plays. I guess one thing we could try to do is turn Wander Franco into a second baseman at 35 years old next year. We could potentially do that. He does have better range than Mejias, which is more important there. So that would be one thing to consider. But I think just from an economics perspective, bringing Mejias back, who does have a better bat than Montoya at this point, probably doesn't make sense to spend over $20 million a year for an average hitter who's a good defensive second baseman. So Montoya may have spent his last season with the team, put up a 2.4 WAR, largely driven by his great defensive value. Drew Romo, mediocre season with the bat, hit just 226 with a 70 OPS plus. Did put up a 1.4 WAR, still a very good defensive catcher. Eric Cares, our center fielder, hit 300, 16 homers, 65 ribbies, 125 OPS plus, 3.7 WAR on the season. Jared Kelenic, 36 years old, starting to slow down a little bit. 18 homers and 57 ribbies, hit 242, 91 OPS plus, 0.7 WAR, made $24 million this season. It will be his last season in pinstripes because we will be moving Eric Markin, who hit 421 in just 57 at-bats, onto the Major League roster to take Kelenic's spot. Bo Bichette had a very injury-filled season. Batted just 235 with 8 homers and 37 ribbies, put up only a 2.0 WAR, which in the context of Bo Bichette's Hall of Fame production throughout his career is the lowest figure that he has put up since 2023 with the Blue Jays. He is wrecked physically, which obviously is not good. Still an excellent defensive shortstop. Pretty much kind of a slightly above average hitter at best at this point. The hope is that we can get 130 games out of him and not have any significant injuries next season before his contract with us is over. And then Anthony Siegler and Kevin Blunt, backup catcher and a utility infielder. Respectable season. Siegler with an 82 OPS plus, and then Blunt batted 326 and 141 at-bats, putting up a 130 OPS plus for us. So we have plenty of offense. The only negative, if we do decide to move on from Montoya and give the job to Mejias, our batting will still be very strong. We will be losing the glove at second base, and the other issue is that Montoya has over the last few years been our backup shortstop to Bo Bichette. Between Franco, Mejias, and Dave Bravo, definitely don't have anyone capable of playing shortstop on a consistent basis, so we'll have to look for a good defensive utility infielder who could be Bichette's backup, particularly because at this stage in his career he's probably going to be spending some time on the IL next year. Turning to our pitching staff, Bobby Chapa, another really good year as our ace, 14-5, 4.29 ERA, which was good for a 112 ERA plus, 4.7 WAR on the season, so a good solid year there. Jack Leiter, who we signed to a 3-year extension during the season, 10-11, 4.08 ERA, a WAR of 1.9. He'll be back. The hope is that he'll be kind of a 4th or 5th starter for us next year, depending on how the off-season goes and who we sign, who we bring back, and who we lose. Euricio Castillo, 8-7 record, but a 5.11 ERA. Not as good a season as he's had in the past. Tyler Fullman, who we traded for at the trade deadline, was 3-3 with a 3.26 ERA for us. Going to have a decision to make on him as he will be a free agent this offseason. Tyson Neighbors, 10-7, 4.48 ERA. Put up a 1.8 WAR on the season. Not a great year for him, but he will be back into the rotation next year. Ken Thomas, strong reliever, a bit of a down year, 4.36 ERA, but still struck out 113 batters in 97 innings. Tony Rivas, left-hander, excellent year out of the bullpen with a 2.85 ERA. Thomasine Kaku, much better second season in the American Major Leagues with a 2.51 ERA and 101 strikeouts in 79 innings. Look forward to seeing what he'll do with the team next year. Danny Harder, nice year out of the pen, 3.42 ERA, 68 1/3 innings. Our closer, Tim Wallace, another great year for him. Saved 37 games, 2.09 ERA with 104 strikeouts and 64 2/3 innings, 2.30 ERA plus, and a 3.3 WAR on the season. Some of the pitchers who pitched fewer innings for us were a little less successful. Max Alba with a 8.89 ERA. Probably will be moving on from him at 36 years old, but he has been starting games for us over the past several years, been a kind of emergency starter for us who has seen a good amount of action in the rotation when we've had injuries. Similarly, Kindon Lavelle, disappointing year for him, 32 years old, coming off of that injury with the 6.66 ERA. We've got to make a decision on his big option very shortly. Ruben Mariona will be a key player for us next year, 23 years old, and he's already fragile coming off of some significant injuries these past couple seasons. When he can stay healthy, he has been a very good major league pitcher. You look at his profile, and maybe he's slightly above average. But the pitching stats that he has delivered at the major league level, a 1.98 career ERA with a 2.34 ERA plus 73 FIP minus. The issue is that over the past 2 years, he's only been able to play 15 games for us and pitch a total of 77 and a third innings. So going to be hard to rely on him to be pitching 30 games for us next year, which is clearly what we'd want to see from a member of our starting rotation. So we've got Chappa, Leiter, and Neighbors kind of signed to lead the rotation. Going to have some decisions to make around the likes of Fullman, Lavelle, and Alba. Mariona will be back, but probably don't want to count on him for 180 innings and 30 starts. And then Euricio Castillo can potentially start for us in a pinch. So thinking about the offseason, big decision that we're going to need to make is what to do with second baseman Jose Montoya and whether or not we want to bring him back for a lot of money. I'm going to have to figure out what to do with the option on Kindon Lavelle, and then potentially think about bringing back Tyler Fullman, as a potential fifth starter, but he's probably going to be looking for a lot more money than he made this year when he was only making $840,000 a year. Let's see exactly what he's looking for. $7.6 million a year. So that's not completely out of the realm of thought. That's almost what we're paying Leiter to be kind of a back end starter for us. Tyler Fullman is still, not as injury prone as a lot of soon to be 33-year-old pitchers. And when you look at what he's done at the major league level over the years, pitched a 147 ERA plus and a 74 FIP minus with us. And over the course of his career, kind of an average major league starter. But if we have a good defensive behind him and a good offense putting runs on the board for him, seems like someone who could certainly win, in the teens in games for us if he goes out and pitches 32 times for us next year. So have a lot of decisions that we will be making in the upcoming postseason. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Disappointed that we did not get a repeat World Series championship this year, but the goal is to build a team that will be able to do it next season. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.